To say that this past summer was the usual ho-hum summer for IPFW athletics would be a gross misunderstatement. On this week's season opening edition of Mastodon Spotlight, we'll take a look back to see just exactly what has transpired over the summer and what the future holds for athletics here at IPFW. It's the season premiere of Mastodon Spotlight, and it's coming up next, right here on College 56 Sports.
Crackhead, drug dealer, street hustler, gang member. All kicked out of the community with the help of kids
like me.
Me.
Us.
You can make a difference. We have the power to help prevent crime. Call 1-800-722-TEENS to find out what you can do in your community.
It's time we're judged by
what we do,
not how we look.
Hi again, everybody. I'm Mike Moz. Welcome to season number 2 of Mastodon Spotlight. Well, as I said a moment ago, this past summer was not the usual summer for IPFW athletics. And our special guest today, Dr. Walter Bowman, Director of Athletics here at the university, will explain just exactly what has happened. First and foremost, Dr. Bowman, welcome back for season number 2.
It's always good to return and to be back for a second year, so I'm looking forward to it.
Let's talk about what has transpired over the summer. When we last met and talked to our viewers, we were awaiting a decision from the NCAA, a decision that could have tremendous effects either way with not only the athletic department, but the entire university and the community of Fort Wayne. Let's talk about what we were trying to do and where things stand.
Well, you are correct when it says it's going to impact everybody. As you know, Chancellor Wortell, just prior to June 1st, did put in a letter to the NCAA addressing our desire to make a transition from Division II to Division I. I would have to admit that at that point in time, my feeling was that it was wired, that we were going to receive it, and so subsequently we were very surprised when in early July it was determined that our bid to do that had been denied by the NCAA. In actuality, it was a little bit of a technicality. The manual calls, as we followed, the letter to go in prior to June 1st. And actually what had happened is that in April, one of the committees who deal with all of the legislation had met and had set then April 10th as the deadline for the letter, and in doing so had not notified the membership. There had been nothing written, there had been no letters going to chancellors or presidents or athletic directors, and so while we were still living according to the manual June 1st, they had very abruptly changed the rule and set a date that the letter had to be in, as I said, on April 10th, and had not notified anybody. So we were stunned when we found out, A, that we didn't get it, and number 2, the rationale as to what took place.
Stunned may not be the right word. Looking back, was there perhaps anger and frustration? Because you've worked awfully hard to get this move made from D2 to D1, and you've talked to many people throughout the community, in the public sector, the private sector, the athletic sector. What was your gut initial reaction?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting because we were actually having a coaches meeting when the call came in, and I was called out of the coaches meeting and knew when I got called out that this was the answer. And when the person on the other end of the phone said, "We've just heard from the NCAA and we've been denied," I think I actually sat there for 30 seconds without saying a word. I mean, I was flabbergasted. It wasn't a matter of anger. It wasn't a matter of frustration. It was just being stunned. And then as I asked a couple questions and we really didn't know very much, we were told we had to wait till we got some kind of a letter or notification. Actually, I had to go back and say to the coaches, we didn't get it. That was probably the hardest thing, because I think we were all so mentally prepared, at least I was mentally prepared. And I think I was just kind of lost for 24, 48 hours in figuring out, what do we do now? What went wrong? Where do we really stand? You just addressed it right. We had been out in the community. Things had gone very, very well up to that point. And so, as I say, I think being flabbergasted and stunned more than, and at no point have I been angry or frustrated. I understand how the NCAA works. A lot of people who don't, I've worked with the NCAA or through the things for about 35 years now. And what people don't understand is that the people who sit at one plaza down in Indianapolis, the people there, they don't make the decisions. It's the committee work, which is made up of all the colleges and universities across the country. And the people at one plaza simply implement. And so at the committee meetings that have been held in late June in Boston, there have both been a subcommittee and a management committee. And that's where those people said that we had not met this self-imposed April 10th deadline, and it was for that reason that we didn't get it. There were no other discussions there. It was simply, there was no paperwork in the NCAA office at that date. It was an open and closed shut case. So our thing then came to be, how do we turn that about? And that's what we really started to do subsequently to that decision.
Well, that was leading up to my next question. Like many great athletes, they can get knocked down, but they get back up. The decision was to appeal the rejection. How long did it take you and everyone involved to make the decision to appeal? And then what were the transcending steps after that?
In actuality, it was a very short period of time, and I think that I would be less than honest to say and to thank the chancellor and the vice chancellor. I think they were as surprised as we were. I think we felt that we had done everything that had been called for up until that time. I think we got the decision on a Tuesday, if I remember correctly, and the following Monday, the Chancellor Wortell, Vice Chancellor Branson, and myself actually went down to One Plaza, the NCAA headquarters in Indianapolis, and there we met with Chief of Staff David Burst, the Executive Vice President for Membership Services, Kevin Lennon, and David Burst, right-hand person, Robin Green. We basically went and initially were saying that we were there to find out what went wrong, and we met with them for an hour. We met at starting at 4 o'clock on that Monday afternoon, and I think it became very apparent to them within minutes of sitting down that the things that we had done in preparation for this had not really reached the subcommittee. I think one of the things that they were looking on was the fact that there had been no clear oral or written documentation. And as we said to them, that as far as the written documentation, that was correct. On April 10th, there was no written documentation because we were going by the manual. At that point, I even said to Kevin Lennon, even at this date, which I think then was August 1st, I said, have you yet sent out anything to anybody in the country that talks about this new date? And of course, the answer was no. And so I think that they realized that there had been maybe some miscommunication, but the more we talked, it became evident to them that starting back a year ago in October, when myself and 2 other of our foundation board of directors went down and met with them, I think we recapped with the many telephone calls that we had had with Jim Johnson from Membership Services. I think we recapped the many calls that I had personally had with Kevin Lennon, who was sitting in that very room. So I think it became, to them, very apparent that we had had significant oral contact, clearly outlining what our desires were. And I think when they really realized that, I think when they realized that we were going to have this Division I soccer tournament, I think when they realized the types of things that we had done through the Royal Dons Board of Directors, the Business 100, the Grand Society, I think when they realized that what we were doing in the city to raise resources for this, I think when they realized that the coaches had spent basically all of May and all of June looking forward to next year and lining up Division I schedules. I think when they realized that we had ordered the NCAA Division I manual last January, it became very apparent that we had done an awful lot of oral communication in the direction. It was at that point that they actually encouraged us to appeal the decision, even with the outlet that they would help us in that appeal. In other words, they would take a look at it and help get it, and that they would, in basic from the NCAA, that they would endorse that. And so that's really where we left things on that Monday, and by that Friday, we had actually turned the appeal back in to them. So it was a very quick turnaround. It was probably totally less than, it was about a week and a half from the time we heard no, till we met with them, till we got the appeal in. And even as we sit here today, we're waiting to hear the appeal. I know we're going to talk about that a little later, but I would tell the people watching to stay tuned for later on in this show. But at the same time, we believe that tomorrow, September 6th, is what we would call the, quote, drop-dead date. We will hear something from them tomorrow as it relates to the whole status of our appeal.
What are the NCAA's options? Is it a cut and dried, yes, we reversed the decision that we made back in June and July, and we can get the 2-year exemption and we can set up for Division I right away, or might there be some other options stretching it out? And again, we'll talk about this more in another segment, but what kind of flexibility does the NCAA have in this issue?
Yeah. In actuality, it's pretty black and white now. I mean, either we're either going to get the appeal tomorrow, which means we're already in that 2-year transition, or it's going to be denied. And that is the last of the appeal process. If it's denied, we literally have to wait a year and apply again. If it's granted, then everything is as we've expected it to be since last June. And we basically are started the 2-year transition immediately.
If I can backtrack just one more time, when the initial decision was made and it was rejected, what kind of feedback did you get from the general public and also from some of these groups that work so hard and that you and your helpers went to, solicited,
Yeah.
I don't want to use the term beg, borrow, steal,
Right.
but I want to use that
Right.
phrase.
Yeah.
What comments did you get from those folks?
Well, you know, it was very, very interesting. I think that there was a tremendous amount of disappointment from the greater Fort Wayne community. I think that much like ourselves, they did not understand it. But I think even more than that, initially, I think that there was a feeling, how could you folks have missed a date? I think they didn't really understand that we didn't miss a date, that the NCAA had superimposed an earlier date. And so I think initially there was probably some frustration on some of our friends out here in Fort Wayne to say, you know, you guys have worked for this and you missed the date you had to have. So I think that caused us a little bit of trouble. But I think once they became aware that we really hadn't, and that we were going to appeal it, and that it was it was really a technical point, then I think that turned it right around. And I think right now everybody's just sitting and waiting. Probably the biggest thing it's had to do over the summer and all is it's probably put us on hold for 6 weeks while we're waiting to see what's taking place. And that's been unfortunate because we were riding high in the saddle. Things were going very well. People were joining the different boards and Business 100 and Grand Society. And I think when that happened, people were saying, well, wait a minute, you know, we're going to have to wait 2 years or where we are. So tomorrow is a very critical day. Again, getting back into this, I think if we do receive if the appeal is granted, I think it'll take about 10 minutes and we're right back on the road where we were. I think if it isn't granted, I think we're going to have to recaucus and actually assess where we are and what's happening.
We'll talk more about what may or may not happen in a later segment. Before we break from this segment, I think we have to acknowledge the fact that another school year is now underway. Classes are in session, and we have a number of intercollegiate athletic teams that are already in action. I know next week we're going to have Terry Stefankowitz on, and we're going to talk about the on-the-field success of the recently completed soccer showcase. But we've got men's and women's soccer, women's tennis, men's and women's cross country, and I'm trying to remember the other sport that's going on right now. Tennis, cross country, see, women's volleyball. Kelly, don't get mad at me, Kelly Hartley. But the season is underway. And as we prepare to exit from this segment, a quick thought on the fall season right now.
Well, of course, you and many others know we just completed the Soccer Showcase 2000. We can talk about that later, but that was an outstanding event, and certainly by all appearances they're going to be back next year. I mean, Jerry Yegley's already expressed that he wants to help us get those teams, and we're looking forward to that. Men and women's soccer has started. Our women's soccer team won their first ever game. We're certainly delighted at that, and that team is almost all freshmen. The men's soccer is, I think, 1-1 right now. Volleyball won the opening tournament a week ago. Had a very tough road experience this week in California against literally some of the best in the nation, which I'm sure Kelly will talk about in another week or so. Cross country got started Saturday, and actually there were 10 teams running down at Anderson, and we had one of our men's runner placed third. I think another one placed eighth. I think we had a female that placed in the teens and another one in the 22nd. So, I mean, great things are happening there, and probably the biggest change we've had since you and I talked is many of our friends out there are watching this may or may not realize that Jay Webb has left the university and has taken a position at Northern Kentucky. That was a very difficult decision for him. We're very fortunate, though, in the fact that we did hire somebody right here from the city, and we've picked that program up without missing too much of a beat, although transitions are always difficult. They're never easy. So the fall season has started. It's going well. We have games this week, which I'm sure we're going to get to at some point in time here, and we're just looking forward to another great year.
We're going to take a little break right now here on Mastodon Spotlight, and when we come back, you will get an up-close look at a lot of the men and women who will be leading the athletic teams as it's Coach's Bio Time on the next segment of Mastodon Spotlight.
What would you do if you had to choose between the buffalo and the giraffes? Between a flower or an elephant? What would you choose? What if you had to decide between a 100-year-old tree and a 1,000,000-year-old beach? Between drinking clean water or breathing clean air? Would you make the right choice? Would there be a right choice? Now there's a way to help. Not just one, but all these things. EarthShare, the world's leading environmental groups working together. It's one choice we can all live with. Ask your employer about workplace giving.
I'm Doug Knoll, head men's basketball coach here at Indiana Purdue Fort Wayne. Looking forward to an exciting 2000-2001 season as the Mastodons go through the Great Lakes Valley Conference this year, and you fans can catch us on Channel 56 as well as Mastodon Spotlight, or coming out to watch the Mastodons play at the Gates Sports Center. We're looking forward to a great year with 5 returners coming back to play for us this year, including juniors Nick Wise, our leading returning scorer at 15 points a game, Brad Knoll, shooting guard at 8 points a game, and Dwight Crow and D'Angelo Woodall, both sophomores coming back, who have had good experience last year with our men's basketball program. 2 transfers, including John Watkins from DeKalb High School and Wright State at 6'8", and Matt Shepard, a 6'7" power forward from Muskegon Community College, will shore up the front line as far as transfers go. Freshmen, we've got Mike Miller from South Bend. We've got Jerry Angel from Dayton, Chaminade Julian, Ryan Pasco of Tip City, Ohio, John Taylor of Fort Wayne Southside, and we also have Lindsey Henderson, 6'8", from Hammond Morton, and Jim Kesnick, 610 from Milwaukee Washtenaw Catholic High School. We're excited about this upcoming year. We hope you are too. Come out and watch the Dons in action, or also catch us on Channel 56 or Mastodon Spotlight.
Okay. Hi, I'm Terry Stefankiewicz. I'm the head men's and women's soccer coach here at Indiana Purdue in Fort Wayne. And I want to thank the community of Fort Wayne for supporting us in our soccer showcase this past weekend. We had a tremendous success in terms of the games. We had 7 Division I schools here, and the people in Fort Wayne came out and supported us in droves. We had over 5,000 people for the weekend, so it was a tremendous success, and I want to thank you. But please continue to follow us. This Sunday we play Missouri Rolla, who is ranked 3rd in the region, at 3 o'clock for the men, and at 12 we play the same team, Missouri Rolla, for the women.
You ready?
Hi, my name is Roxanne Cron, and I'm the men and women's tennis coach at IPFW. This is my first year here. I have coached at the high school level for several years. I'm real excited about this year. We have a lot of returning players plus several new recruits that will really help our team. Coming back for IPFW on the girls team is Dawn Carrier, Rebecca Meyer, Christina Poppy, and Laura Fisher. Joining them, we have 2 new recruits, Karen Swanson and Stacy Sharlock, who have really been helping us out in our lineup. Looking on the other side, the guys team, we have many returning, and also added to our team this year is Lucas Boyer and Matt Bloom, Rod Kirkland and Kyle Sprunger. Those are our new freshmen coming in that are really going to step in and play a good role in our lineup. So I'm really excited about the season. Both teams have been working really hard in practice, and I think we're going to really come out this season and do very well.
Hi, my name is Billy Gernon. I'm the head baseball coach here at IPFW. I'll be starting my 2nd season as the head coach, coming off last year's 24-25 season, where we just fell 2 short games of making the playoffs in the GLVC. This year we have 8 seniors returning: Chris Bloom, Steve Butcher, Brian Boggs, Jason Collins, Pete Warfel, Rich Hale, Shannon Kimmel, and Brad Smock. They make up a real strong nucleus of a returning squad, along with a tremendous recruiting class and 11 strong freshmen with a couple of JUCO transfers that we feel are going to mesh in tremendously well with the nucleus that we've brought back from last year. We're excited about this year. We're looking forward to getting started, and this fall is going to be a window for us to view what kind of talent we really do have as they perform on the collegiate level, especially for our freshmen coming in from high school. We're staying focused as always on academics, knowing that they always precede athletics, and we'll keep that theme throughout the year as we strive to have 100% graduation with our ball players. I feel fortunate to be here at the university, and I'm proud to be the head coach of IPFW baseball.
Hello, I'm Carl Smesko. I'm the head women's basketball coach at IPFW. Last season was a big turnaround season for the Mastodons, and we hope to continue on that success. We've added plenty of fresh faces. We're going to be a very exciting team, much more athletic, much better defensively. Hopefully you will all be able to come out and join us at the Hilliard Gate Center. And if not, hopefully at least you'll be able to catch us on Mastodon Spotlight.
Hi, I'm Coach Fisher, Keith Fisher, head softball coach at IPFW. I have 2 assistants, Dennis Smith and Jennifer Long. My background as far as coaching, I actually started last year in March. Came on right at the spring season of softball, and we had 17 girls to start out with. We wound up with 14. I had a real successful season. This year we're working to have a winning season throughout the entire program. We have 7 returning softball players, an excellent group coming back. We recruited 5 different girls. We have 3 freshmen coming. 1 girl's from Kingman, Arizona. One of our recruits that's sort of a transfer student is from Boynton Beach, Florida. We have another freshman from Elkhart, Indiana. We have one from Crown Point, Indiana. And we've seen that with this nucleus of young people and also our experienced girls coming back, we're looking for an outstanding season coming up this year. We start out this fall with approximately 12 games. This weekend we start at Grace College. The following weekend we play Tri-State and also go to Indiana Wesleyan for a tournament. After that we go down to Ball State, play Ball State, Butler, and University of Indianapolis. And winding up the fall season, we're going to Purdue University, and we're going to play Indiana State for the first game and then Purdue University the second game. So with a fall schedule like that, we're going to see actually what we're made out of. We are looking for a lot of good things. We've got some good pitching, and if without good pitching, you don't have much of a ball club. But we have some strong pitching coming back, and we have some strong pitching that we recruited. Then for the spring season, starting out in March, we're going to the University of West Florida, and we'll play down there for a week, and then we start in our conference play. And so hopefully by the end of the season, our goal is to have a winning season, go to postseason conference, and do the best we can.
I'm Kelly Hartley, head women's volleyball coach here at IPFW. I hope you'll come out and see us play this year. Our next home match is September 15th when we open up our conference play against Lewis, 7 o'clock. That'll also be carried live on Channel 56. It'll be an opportunity this year to see our two seniors, two local talents, Laura Douglas and Tammy Ish, play in their senior seasons. They're co-captains for us and clearly leaders on this team. We've also added some local talent, some fresh new faces. Sarah Leffers, who's a defensive specialist from Southside, and Zira Mazouk, a setter from Northrop. We're 3-4 right now, coming off 4 matches in California, where I feel like we played well, though we came up short and came home with no wins. But we feel very prepared for now our regional play and our conference play, leading up to what our goal is, and that is a conference title and an NCAA tournament berth. Hope to see you in the 15th.
As the American military gets smaller, who will be there to answer the call? They will. They're the National Guard and Reserve, and they make up half of today's military forces. As an employer, you may be asked to support their mission. Remember, their response depends on yours.
Do you know who I am? Am I a P or a D? A Q, perhaps? Or a B? I am dyslexia, and millions of kids struggle with me every time they read. Call now to help your child manage his learning disability. There's no reason to be held back.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. We hope you enjoyed that little segment, getting a look up close at the head coaches here at IPFW, and you will see all of those coaches during the course of the year here on Mastodon Spotlight. Back to the issue at hand. My special guest today is Dr. Walter Bowman, Director of Athletics here at IPFW. We've been talking about the potential switch from Division II to Division I athletics here at the university, and Dr. Bowman, as we said in an earlier segment, as this show is being prepared, we are still awaiting the verdict on the appeal from the NCAA. Since we can't judge the future, let's talk a little hypothetically, both sides of the coin. If the NCAA decides to reverse their decision from June and July and grant us immediate 2-year exemption status, and we're on the road to Division I, what does that do for the current status of athletic programs here at the university?
Well, the first thing that it does, and when you make a transition like this, there are always potentially programs as well as student athletes that are put in a sort of a hiatus and to some degree a little disruptive, because the 2-year transition is to help us make from Division II to Division I. And certainly there are some things that we wish weren't part of the NCAA in doing that, but there is some fallout to that. The number one fallout, for lack of a better word, is the fact that immediately all of our teams are ineligible for postseason play. That doesn't mean that we would have done so well this year that we would have gotten there. What it does mean, based upon last year when we had some teams that went to postseason, that avenue for the next 2 years is cut off while we make this transition. During that transition, of course, we have an opportunity to make sure all of our programs get into line, to make sure that we continue to build toward our 78 scholarships, to continue bringing student athletes in that are Division I caliber, that meet the clearinghouse regulations. And so there's a lot to do. In one sense, it's interesting that if the appeal is upheld tomorrow night, we're going to actually very quickly say the easiest part of the whole thing is now done. Now the hard work begins, the 2-year transition and getting ready. I think the bigger thing, though, beyond all of that, is that next year's schedule in every sport will be predominantly Division I. And I think that the people who are watching this are going to be extremely excited. There's things that we can't talk about until we hear what this decision is. But I can tell you now, the contracts that we have in front of us, particularly in men's basketball, for major Division I competition is amazing. And we'll slowly begin to get that word out once we hear what this decision is. So I think just having all the schedules transition into Division I and the caliber of the teams and the difference in the teams that we're going to bring in, plus the difference in the student athletes we're going to recruit, is going to be overwhelming.
Can I get one point of clarification? We mentioned all sports would be affected. Does that also include men's volleyball, which for practical purposes has been operating on a D1? Because they've been in the Final Four on several occasions.
Yeah, no, it does not affect men's volleyball, and the reason it doesn't is that the volleyball is not an NCAA national championship. So the men's volleyball, if they continue to do as they've done in other years and they win their side, their tournament, then they would be able to advance to postseason play in the sport of volleyball.
Okay, I just wanted to get that point cleared because
and I'm glad you did.
Let's talk for a moment about, again, assuming that the appeal is upheld and the exemption period is started. Point number one you mentioned is that postseason play is out. What kind of feedback might you expect from some of the upperclassmen, and in particular I want to talk about the seniors, on the various teams that all of a sudden their hopes and dreams are down the tubes, for lack of a better phrase? I know it's a sore subject, but it's a subject that has to be addressed, especially if this appeal is upheld.
Well, it's not per se a sore subject, it's a difficult subject. Any time that student-athlete lives are affected, and particularly whether you start with the seniors and you work backward to the freshmen, it's a difficult situation. However, no matter when you make this decision, whether you wait 5 years from now and you then do it, whoever the seniors are that year are going to be impacted. What you're having to really take a look at is what is in the best interest at this time in the life of the university, the life of the department, within the greater context of the Fort Wayne community, understanding that probably in the next 2 years you're going to see dorms here, you're going to see a lot of other things. And so we have to be prepared to do a lot of things, both in terms of student life and other types of activities. Clearly, though, it will impact some students. It's not impacting them necessarily, although it probably will 1 or 2 students, the eligibility. But it more impacts, like you say, the great team that was going to go on and do whatever. I think at that point in time, and there aren't words that can soothe or put an ointment on or to do anything else. Clearly there will be some that will be very disappointed in that. However, I think that's where you reach a little deeper. I think that's where your maturity comes out. I think that's where your love of your program comes out. I think that's where the love and respect of your coach comes out, as to say, okay, we've sort of had to swallow one for the betterment of everything, but you know what? We're going to go out like Auburn did a couple of years ago in football, where they went 11-0, And as far as they were concerned, they celebrated the national title within their department. They were 11-0, they were undefeated. I think it still gives all those programs that opportunity. But I also know that it takes a certain resiliency and a certain maturity to suddenly say, okay, we still got the games this weekend and next week and everything else, and we're going to go for it, and we're going to do the very, very best that we can, because we got to take pride in what we do. And the same way that it hurts us as a department maybe not to go to postseason play, if we had turned around and had won some championships, we still have to stagger through that and to get to the other side of it. But at the same time, we have to keep our eyes on the bigger picture. That out there, that's first off, for all of our student athletes that return next year, they'll be playing Division I. And 2 years from now, they'll be eligible for all the postseason play in Division I. So in that sense, that 24 months is going to go very, very fast. And I think it's important that as we start the 21st century and we're now in the 2001 year, that we really understand this is a decision that we're making for the long-range future, and that's in the best interest of the university at this particular time.
Let's go one step further on this side of the coin, and then we'll go on the other side of the coin. If it's approved, besides the probation and the ineligibility for tournament play, next year, in almost all sports, with the possible exception of volleyball, being the MEV, I should say, quote-unquote unofficial sport, we would be competing on an at-large basis. What are the latest thoughts, hopes, goals of conference affiliation, assuming we end up going to D1?
Right. Again, you break it down. We certainly would appear on paper as we're standing now, would be independent next year. We would hope that over the next 12 to 36 months that we would find a conference that would be compatible to who we are. There has been much written about the Mid-Continent. Clearly, that is a conference that our sister institution in Indianapolis is currently competing. Geographically, it would seem to be a fit. However, I would very hasten to say right up front, there is no commitment as we sit here right now for the Mid-Con to take us. I think we certainly are going to begin a series of in-depth conversations with them. It clearly is where we would like to be. We think it makes sense. And I believe that as we look out over the next 3 years, that the possibility is maybe good that might be. Short of that, I'm not sure where we might be. We know we don't want to play independent 3, 4, 5 years from now. That's just not where we want to be. We need to be in a conference, and we need to be in one that's geographically aligned and compatible with the academic integrity and history of this institution.
As I said, let's play devil's advocate, the other side of the coin. If the appeal is rejected, what are the next steps for the university from an athletic standpoint?
Well, I think the first thing that's going to take place is that we're going to have to sit down between Chancellor Wortell and Vice Chancellor Branson and myself, probably some of our community leaders, and to say, okay, where are we? And I think the unknown in all of that is if you say, okay, if everything stays the same, okay, you put the letter in 15 months from now, and you wait the year and a half you have to wait, and then you're just 2 years from now, so that by the year 2002 and 2003 are transition years. All that's well and good, with the exception of between now and then the NCAA may decide to put additional moratoriums on. Right now they want to have a 2-year moratorium, which is why we've had to appeal. There's nothing to say that a year from now they might say, gee, we want to put a 5-year moratorium, or they might say, we're not going to accept anybody else into Division I. We don't know those things. So we're going to have to let it play itself out a little bit. I think that clearly the NCAA is trying to cut back and to make it, and it's not fair to say to make it more difficult, but I clearly think they want to slow down the onslaught coming into Division I. I think all 3 divisions want an opportunity, since they went federated a couple years ago, to really see and let everything shake down into national champions. As you know, in Division III and Division I right now, the winner of every conference sport gets an automatic bid. That hasn't happened yet in Division II. I think that will happen, over the next 2 to 3 years, because I don't think you can have 2 divisions that allow automatics and then 1 division that doesn't. So I think the management committee and the governance committee of Division II is having to really look at that now, particularly for their student athletes, because you can't disenfranchise a total division when you have the divisions on either side of it. Those student athletes have access to postseason play. I think they have to take a look at what are those championship budgets, what are those bracket expansions. And I think all of those things are going to have an effect on what's going to take place in the various divisions over the next couple of years. So if something were to happen and we do not, if our appeal is not upheld, we're going to have to quickly caucus and see where we are. I think the tea leaves that I read, all things being equal, there would be those that would say, well, this just allows you to get your program a little bit more in line from a fundraising standpoint. And there may be some yays and nays in that. I think, though, that the time we lose is going to be more detrimental than the time we gain if that were to happen. However, the short answer to your whole question is that all things being considered, we would simply wait the period of time and most likely reinitiate our letter.
Well, on next week's edition of Mastodon Spotlight, in addition to talking to Terry Stefankowitz, who will be the both men's and women's soccer coach, we hope to have possibly a short segment with you back, because the decision should be made. But we'll let that rest until next week in our remaining time this evening, as far as the viewers are concerned. As we mentioned, that the athletic programs are underway. In a quick 90 seconds or so, your hopes, dreams, goals, and desires for the athletic program in 2000-2001.
Well, you know, I want to start out by saying that my hopes and my goals are, A, that the seniors are on target to graduate, that all of our student athletes who have started this year and in the sports can say at the end of the year that they grew not only in playing their sport, but in their knowledge of their sport. And that they, and in that sense, that the true concept of the teacher coach is out there, because I think we have great teacher coaches. I would hope that the city of Fort Wayne, regardless of what happens tomorrow, will come out and understand that this is their university and that we want them to come and enjoy Mastodon athletics as they did the soccer showcase a week ago. We want our friends that are viewing this to say, hey, there's a volleyball game, there's a basketball game, or there's a tennis match or something else. We want them to come. We want to continue to make friends in that community so that our student athletes, not only for our own students here, but what is available out there, can enjoy the fruits of that labor, and the people of Fort Wayne will come and support that.
As always, Dr. Bowman, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate your contributions as to what's happening here on campus and what we hope to see happen. And again, continued success, and we'll probably talk next week briefly.
I look forward, if that's the occasion, to be back here, and thanks again for allowing me to share some time with all of our friends in Fort Wayne.
Dr. Walter Bowman, Director of Athletics here at IPFW, has been our special guest today. And that's it for edition number 1 of season number 2 of Mastodon Spotlight. As always, we thank everyone involved here at the university, and we thank you, the viewer, for tuning in to see what's going on with IPFW athletics. Until next week, this is Mike Maas saying, have a great week, and go Dons.
Thursday, September 7th, 2000 will be a date long remembered in the annals of IPFW athletics. On this week's edition of Mastodon Spotlight, we're going to take a look and see how the decision made by the NCAA on that date affects IPFW athletics. The show is called Mastodon Spotlight, and it's coming up next.
So what do you think? You hungry?
Yeah.
To be a mentor, you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be yourself. Do good. Call 1-877-BE-A-MENTOR.
It was called the greatest generation any society has ever produced. They were ordinary people who half a century ago did nothing less than help save the world. Millions served in uniform, millions more served at home, and nearly 500,000 gave their lives. And yet there is no national memorial to honor their sacrifice. It is time to say thank you.
Call now and help build the National World War II Memorial.
Hi again, everybody. I'm Mike Moss. Welcome to another edition of Mastodon Spotlight. Well, as I said a moment ago, Thursday, September 7th, 2000 was a landmark date for IPFW athletics because that was the day the NCAA ruled on the appeal that the university filed to get us going from Division II to Division I. And the first of my special guests today, as promised from last week's show, is Dr. Walter Bowman, Director of Athletics here at IPFW. And Dr. Bowman, let's talk about Thursday, September 7th.
Very delighted to talk about it. As you know, it's been a culmination of 15 months' work. Lots of people in our community, a lot of people inside IPFW, a lot of committees, numerous students, coaches, and at 3 o'clock on the afternoon of the 7th, we finally received the telephone call that we had been waiting. And Kevin Lennon, the Executive Vice President for Membership Services, called me to tell me that the votes were in and that we were officially NCAA Division I and could begin our transition, and actually rolled it back to September 1 to begin the 2-year transition to full compliance and membership.
The decision itself was actually delayed by some 24 to 30 hours because when we spoke on the show last week, we were waiting and anticipating the call on Wednesday.
Right.
What happened, or what did you feel when there was no call on Wednesday?
Well, fine. It was interesting because you and I had actually taped the show starting at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning the 6th. And we had talked about waiting, and of course it got to about 2 o'clock that afternoon, and I finally called the NCAA and I said, is there somebody down there that can tell me what has happened on this committee that got together on the phone? And the lady who I talked to said, well, let me call you back. I got to find somebody that knows what it is. And at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Kevin Lennon called, and he said, Walt, I don't even know where to start. And certainly started to apologize, and then basically said, we forgot it on the agenda. And he said, we hung up the phone, and until your call came through to let us know that we had, but he said it didn't make it on the docket. And he said, even as we're talking, we're getting the information and trying to get people back together. He said it will be as early as Friday, no later than next Monday. But I knew at that point that they were very embarrassed by what had taken place. And I really expected to hear Friday. So, of course, I was very pleasantly surprised, but I mean, there's no doubt they really got themselves in gear and got the people on and got the vote and then notified us on Thursday. So that started the celebration, and yet at the same time, that celebration has been tempered. I'm sure you're aware, as many folks who are watching us out there, this decision has impacted some lives of some of our student athletes. And as we talked last week, no matter when we make the decision, lives were going to be impacted. But when you actually face the reality of it, it's also sobering. But while we are very definitely celebrating just a great new beginning to athletics at IPFW and for Fort Wayne, at the same time, some of that has been tempered just a little bit, understanding that there are some student athletes who have been impacted, and yet, even as you and I talk today, between today and tomorrow, we have already started the appeal process for a number of these student athletes.
Have you had a chance to personally speak to some of the athletes? Admittedly, and we watched it on local television here, some of the athletes were in front of the camera. They were obviously disappointed. Some of them were somewhat bitter because in a sense, and we, as we have talked about, in some ways their athletic careers, they've been adjusted, not totally eliminated, and although in some cases it may come out to that in terms of eligibility. But have you had a chance to speak face-to-face with any of the student athletes?
Yeah. I can honestly say I have not. There has been no student athlete that has come to see me, and I have not yet been in the appropriate venue where I could sit down with an individual team or anything else. I think what's really been important, and I think that time may come, and certainly my office door is open to any student athletes that want to come in, being respectful of the office, and to sit down in a civil way, have a dialogue as to what's taking place, what it might mean in their particular case, because I really, with them, can't talk about particulars that don't pertain to them, and I'm happy to do that. The other thing is, though, right now I really felt that we needed to get a couple of days, maybe a week or so, sort of let this thing settle down a little bit, and then if the appropriate time or a team would like to have me come in, I would be delighted to. We have a lot of options, and the student athletes have a lot of options that haven't even been explored yet. And by no means are most of them even negative. A lot of them are positive. My indication in talking to the majority of the coaches is that there are no student athletes that, as I sit here today, that I'm aware of, that want to leave IPFW. And that's the best news, because clearly while they recognize there's some couple problems here and there, they do want to be here. They've come for the right reason. They've come for the appropriateness of an education at Indiana or Purdue. They've come because of the coach that's recruited them. In most cases, some of them have been here as new coaches came aboard, but they're far enough into their degree program. They appreciate the city of Fort Wayne and what goes on. And so the general feeling I have, even though some will be impacted more adversely than others, they want to be here. They want to finish their education. Those that get to play after this year are going to start with Division I schedules, and those that are here 2 or 3 years from now are going to be fully Division I. So again, we're sensitive to where the problem is, but at the same time, we are celebrating. It is a great new beginning, and every indication that I've had from the city and the people that have called me are more than overwhelmed and pleased at what's going on.
Well, let's go to the next step. We are now approved for Division I status. We start the probation period, which in all but one sport is 2 years. The one sport exception is men's basketball, and that'll be addressed later in this program. What happens now? Obviously, there is the appeal process for certain athletes based on the different Division I, Division II guidelines. But besides the appeal process with the student athletes, what's the next step?
Yeah, I would rather we use the word rather than probation for 2 years. We really are in a transition for 2 years. The 2-year transition, as a matter of fact, one of the NCAA officers are going to be up here, we think, next week to talk to us about that transition, what it means, what are the things we have to do. But it gives us a time to do some things, both in the scholarships, the program alignment, the budgets in the department, things along that line. The biggest thing we're doing now, and as you know, this year's schedule's already set. We are a member of the GLVC. We are doing that schedule, and yet all of our coaches are aggressively pursuing full schedules next year, meeting the minimum standards of Division I play. And that's the big thing we really have to be concentrating on, really for the next 8 or 9 months. Certainly you mentioned in basketball, you're going to be talking, not only have Doug and Carl and I have talked, and they're out making the calls. Terry's been making calls, other coaches have. And so it's not that we're scrambling, we're probably just a little bit late on that, but we're getting that in gear. And of course, we also know that we have a 2-year period to do that, as long as we've met the minimum counters that have to be done.
Let's talk a little bit about the possibility of big name opponents. We've talked before about the possibility of maybe talking to Indiana University or Purdue or Notre Dame, perhaps in terms of basketball. But let's not just talk basketball, let's talk some of the other sports. We had a great soccer showcase that in a couple of programs coming down the road we're going to speak with Terry Stefankowitz about, that just took place, where 7 top-notch Division I schools, in addition to IPFW, came, participated, and from the feedback I heard, hope to make it an annual event.
Yeah.
But talk about some of the other sports,
Right.
some of the preliminary hopes, goals, and plans.
Well, let's talk about the soccer showcase. Matter of fact, we
Okay.
heard from Jerry Yegley yesterday. He's already said, count him in. Notre Dame is already in. And then Jerry and Terry will talk about the other 5 teams, because, of course, we'll be the 3rd one. We know some of the ones that were here this year will come back, but we've already heard that teams like Brown or Connecticut might possibly like to come. So we're working on those names and trying to work out what the guarantees are. At the same time, our friends from Adidas want us to, a week later, see a availability of doing a women's tournament. So again, we're willing to take a look at that. We're talking to Adidas about what input they want into the whole thing, because these aren't inexpensive things to pull off. As we know that each year up till now, Kelly Hartley in volleyball has had an opening season tournament. I'm certainly hopeful that can happen again, and would expect it to, if not next year, shortly after that, where we're bringing in 3 or 4 Division I teams to play in that tournament. Certainly our track and our cross-country schedules, those are going to be increased to more of Division I competitions. So, and again, most of those in most of the cases are away meets. We're going to possibly be invited to go down to Indiana and run in theirs, or the Little State games and some other types of things. And then, of course, our tennis schedule is going to also have to reflect that. And we've already talked about the baseball. The softball schedule is already starting to swing over. Matter of fact, even later this fall, we're going to be in a tournament up at Purdue. But I think you're going to see the softball with Purdue and Indiana and Notre Dame and some of the other teams scheduled next year. Baseball, Billy Gernon is already working on the baseball schedule. I would say their schedule will be predominantly Division I next year. So again, whether it be the soccer showcase, the season play, or whatever else it is, it's going to be predominantly Division I. Certainly in some programs, and probably men and women's basketball to some degree, maybe a little bit more men's, we probably aren't going to have initially as many home games, given that we're going to have to get out on the road and begin to earn our stripes. But most of the other coaches, I think you'll see probably about a 50-50 split, maybe 40-60 in terms of the home 40 and away 60. But these are the growing pains that everybody has to come. So you have the scheduling, which is one aspect. You have the appeals an aspect. Recruiting is probably just a huge thing. And now the coaches know, and of course we know all the regulations in Division I, so that anybody that's coming here from now on clearly comes, and if they're a non-qualifier, then they can't play, or some other exceptions. But basically, we're recruiting student athletes that can play here now and are of Division I caliber.
Let me change gears just slightly. Obviously, one of the hopes and goals is to bring some major powers here, and we're going to talk about men's basketball primarily. The fact that there has been talk and slow movement, if movement at all, for several years now with the Coliseum expansion. And I know we've mentioned on previous shows, it would be great to have an IU or a Purdue or a Notre Dame or another major power come up here to Fort Wayne to play the Dons. Obviously, we're looking at probably playing some of those games at the Coliseum. Is there anything that the boosters and supporters of IPFW can do to help get that done, so that that can enhance and hopefully solidify the decision of some of these other universities to come here?
Well, there's a lot of things that a lot of different people can be doing, whether they're our alumni, whether they're our friends in the city, whether they're faculty here, whatever. There are people within our community who do have a sphere of influence at Notre Dame, Purdue, or Indiana. Certainly some of those people can be very helpful as we talk to those three universities. Going all the way back to last January 20th when we kicked off our Business 100, one of the things that I said to everybody is that at least one of those three teams each year come to Fort Wayne and to kick off a game in the Coliseum. And we're working with all three of those schools right now to see which one might come this year, maybe another one the following year, and a different one the third year. I don't ever see a time when we play all three in a given year here in Fort Wayne. But we would certainly like to open up our first ever home game in Division I at the Coliseum each year for the next 3 years, playing either Purdue, Indiana, or Notre Dame. That is our goal. That's what we're working on. And as the weeks continue to go by, we will keep everybody updated. And when I'm back in October, we can talk about it. In the meantime, we are having a number of other schools, whether it be Bowling Green, Ball State, Evansville, Dayton, Wichita. We have a lot of schools that are calling us, as well as a lot of the mid-con schools. And so we're trying just to fit those. Again, we're going to have to play a little bit more away initially than home. But we do have some schools that are willing to come in here, and we need to be working on that very quickly and very hard.
Since you mentioned the words mid-con, let's get into that area. We know that we're going to be an independent at least next year, if not longer. And obviously, and we've talked about this before in this program, the mid-con conference seems to be a very good fit. It's been noted in the local media that talks have started expanding. What can you say at this point?
Well, I'll say this, that we know that we are going to play where we are this year. And while it's probably correct that I doubt whether we'll be in a conference next year, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. These things have a way of either dragging on or falling into place very quickly. There's no doubt that given our druthers, we would love to be a member of the Mid-Con. I understand that the Mid-Con has some very legitimate concerns. What strength do we bring them? I mean, we don't want to lower their standards. We want to bring them programs of strength, our facilities, our budgets. But at least now the door is open. I don't know whether they're going to expand. It's at least something they're talking about. It's not necessarily something that they're committed to this year, next year, or the following year. But we believe that with our sister institution in Indianapolis there, that geographically where we are for the majority of the schools that are in the Mid-Con, given that their season-ending tournament is played here in Fort Wayne, we believe we're very much a natural fit to that conference. And clearly John Steinbrecher and I are going to keep talking. I would imagine at some point in time the chancellor will become involved in those discussions. But to some degree, we want to work out, we want to see where we need to improve, what we have to do. And I would say over the next 6 to 8 weeks, we'll begin to find out more and more of that information. But if we had our druthers, we would love to be in the Mid-Con, but we're just going to have to wait and see how that plays out.
Let's go to another area now. With the move from Division II to Division I, one of the benefits as far as the athletic department is concerned is the fact that there will be more scholarships made available. I know in basketball we've talked from 5 to 13. I'm not sure what it is in the other sports. How is it going to be an immediate jump, or is it going to be a systematical jump?
Well, as you know, in 2 years, we must have 78 scholarships in that first year, or basically the 2002-2003 year. We must have 78 scholarships spread across the board. 28 of those scholarships have to be in the basketball program, which means 15 go to women, 13 go to men. So that leaves us 50 scholarships. We can always have more. I think in 2 years, we will meet the 78. I don't see us above that. We're already taking steps for next year to upgrade the 2 volleyballs and the 2 basketball programs. They will take substantial steps next year forward so that the following year the jump isn't as big. Over the next 9 months, we will be sitting down and taking a look, what does this mean for baseball, softball, soccer, and the other programs. But we're clearly going to have some programs that are going to be doing very well with scholarship, others that will probably be moderate, and probably some others that will be just slightly above what I would call a seek your own level basis. But down the road, 10 years from now, who knows what all of that means as we continue to expand. As our friends in Fort Wayne and our alumni continue to reach out and like the excitement of this and want to support that, as that goes, we'll grow. But we do know where we have to be, and we are making all of those commitments. We have also have most of those commitments, if not underwritten. We know where those resources are coming from. So there really is not any concern as we look at the 78. We probably have to do some things from a budgetary standpoint, and we're going to be a little bit more creative in that. But I think overall the coaches will be pleased. Will all of them be fully funded? No. But clearly there will be some programs of distinction that are going to have a great opportunity to impact what we're doing and what the city is going to be able to enjoy and see.
One other area we might be able to touch on today, with the move up to D1, we've talked about the increase, the schedules, and the viability of bigger programs coming in. Let's talk about the athletic facilities here on campus. Are there preliminary plans, for example, to make improvements, for example, the baseball and softball fields, putting lights on to have night or things like that?
Yeah. I don't see any of that. I mean, our facilities, and even talking to John Steinbrecher, when you look at what we have available in soccer, you look at our softball field, you look at our baseball field, those are great things. If in the sport of baseball we ever needed, for instance, Indiana's here and we're expecting 5,000 people, I'm sure we can go across the street to Wizard Stadium. But again, we want to keep as many of those venues on our campus for our students, our friends here. Undoubtedly, we would like to continue to refurbish or upgrade any facility. I would think lights down the road, or at least in the foreseeable future, is not on the talking table. We've recently done some things in tennis. They do have some lights, and of course there was the new tennis courts built 3 or 4 years ago. We're in pretty good shape there. I think if we were able to do some things initially, certainly in the Hilliard Gates Center, we would like to do some things in the locker room, bringing them a little bit more into the 21st century. I think we would like to do some things with our bleachers. I think we would like to do some things that we could potentially show off up to now, our athletic history. And those types of refurbishings we would like to get into over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Whether that means we get help in doing that or whether we have to fundraise all of that, that really is unknown now, only because we really haven't bothered to be talking about it. We'd like to improve our fitness center and our wellness center and the track that's there and our weightlifting group. We'd like to expand our training room. We'd like to even have 1 or 2 more offices for the coaches because we're really impacted. So we have to now sit back and take a look at that whole thing and see what our possibilities are. At the same time, recognizing that there aren't state dollars normally for this, that there's so many people out there that are trying to get help from the foundations that it's probably not going to be a real high priority for them. So right now, as I say, we've got some ideas and we just have to look down and see what the cost is and where that might come from.
As always, we just get started in a good conversation and the time runs out. Again, thank you for telling the viewers and supporters of IPFW Athletics the great news. You know, IPFW now is in the process of actually going to be a NCAA Division I university, and hopefully down the road an athletic power. And thanks again for coming on, and we will see you in just a few weeks.
You will, and we're there, and it's exciting, and and I'm delighted to be here in Fort Wayne and to be a part of what's going on at the university. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Walter Bowman has been our first special guest today, Director of Athletics here at IPFW. We'll take a short break, and as we go to break, I want to remind you our first live telecast of IPFW Athletics takes place Friday night at 7 o'clock when Coach Kelly Hartley leads her volleyball team on the floor against Lewis University. Ryan Perrott and Mark Franke will bring you all the action beginning at 7 p.m. right here on College 56, so remember to stay tuned for that. Again, we'll take a little break, and then when we come back, we'll talk with the coach of the program that has the most impact with this decision to go Division I. That's men's head basketball coach Doug Knoll when Mastodon Spotlight returns in just a moment.
Brian's a student that I had in my resource class. Came from a very poor background. Brian just needed a friend, so we paired him with a community leader. He would take him to rodeos, and then he would take him to plays and different things that this child would never have been exposed to. This man taking his time to come and have lunch with him meant more than anything.
Point a kid in the right direction. This is General Colin Powell of America's Promise. Call us and help keep America's Promise.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. One of the sports here at IPFW that's going to be most affected by the change from Division II to Division I status is men's basketball. And one of my special guests today is the head coach here at IPFW for men's basketball, Doug Knoll. Doug, first and foremost, thank you very much for taking time out of your now even more busy schedule to spend a few minutes with us here on Mastodon Spotlight. First and foremost, what was your reaction to the announcement last Thursday that, guess what, we're now Division I?
Well, I think, Mike, initially, I think we all wanted to have some kind of an announcement. You know, it's one of those things where tell me yes, tell me no, but tell me something. You know, this hanging out in the balance was just killing everybody. And I think you have to look at it, number one, overall, for the athletic department, and then also, you know, for our university and our community, as the long term. I think it's very good. Obviously, only speaking for basketball, you know, we were excited about it. We don't have any seniors on the team this year, and so it was a very good year for us to be in transition and make the switch. For the other sports, I know with seniors, with coaches who were really looking forward to postseason play and you know, making some noise like they did last year, it's very disappointing. I can kind of put it back on my shoulders of saying, you know, 2-3 years down the road when my son's a senior, and hopefully we would have been pretty good then, to not be able to go to the tournament I think would be very difficult, and I think that's just being honest. But I really believe overall I think it's great. It's a move to the future. It's what we really need here, and you know, in the paper it kind of said we're ready for the big jump. Well, we're ready for the challenge. We're not ready for the big jump yet. We're a long ways from ready. You don't go in and play, you know, Division I teams and all of a sudden you're competitive. A lot of the teams that have made the jump were very, very successful in either Division II, the NAIA, and they were able to go in and it was a huge step for them, but they had solid programs. For us, we were just getting off the ground floor of teams that have been very mediocre, in part a lot with the limited scholarships and things like that, but all in all, I think as far as the basketball program goes, we're very excited for the opportunities and the challenges that lie ahead. We're disappointed for the kids, especially the seniors that can't go to postseason play this year, but I think the vision of down the road with big-time athletics here is very exciting for Fort Wayne, our university, and our athletic department.
Let's spend a few moments and talk about some of the differences now, that what is going to happen now that we are Division I as opposed to what you would have had to have done in Division II. We can talk about assistants, we can talk about the schedule, we can talk about recruiting. But let's just go for this season. Obviously, we cannot be in postseason play,
right.
But as far as the rest of the schedule this year, what changes, if any, might there be?
There's really not going to be a lot this year, Mike, because we've got our schedule intact. Now, with not going to postseason play, we do get one extra game, and we're going to try to work that game to another Division I opponent if we can. The other things basically come down to academics and recruiting and those types of things. We're really, we may lose 2 kids this year, one being a transfer. We won't lose any eligibility out of him, but going from a Division I to another Division I, you must set out a year. Going from a Division I to a Division II, you could play right away. So we were led to believe even that if he signed before we announced, he would be okay, and that's one of the student athletes they may be appealing or working on. The other one is a freshman who did qualify Division II, and we signed him very early last November. And then once we became a Division One, he was not a qualifier in Division One, so the academics are a lot more difficult. We've got 2 junior college transfers, and they must graduate from the junior college with an associate's degree in order to come in and be eligible. Luckily for us, both of our junior college kids did that, and you know, we think that's important anyways, because if they're graduating, they're doing their homework, they're on time with what they need to do, and so you know, you need to look at that. Recruiting rules are a lot different. We have different setups for how many times we can watch a kid play, you know, how many times we can visit or contact. Even right now in our contact period, we go from about 6 weeks of contact period in Division II to 3 weeks in Division I. So we've really got to pack everything into, you know, this 3 weeks. And we have about 5 or 6 kids on campus this week, and our recruiting just is completely different. I mean, we go from, you know, looking at maybe 50 kids to looking at, you know, 500 kids. And when I say that, I mean you send out a lot of information, a lot of letters. This summer we tried to prepare. We were in New Jersey, New York, Kentucky, Ohio, Minnesota, all over Indiana, Michigan. You know, we went all over trying to just get names of kids and try to see kids play that we think could be possibilities for, you know, for us in our program down the road. We start looking at freshmen now, which we didn't before, and you know, with a limited recruiting budget and limited scholarships, you know, we had to look at juniors and seniors. Now we've got to open that up to freshmen, sophomores, kids that we can, you know, send one letter to with a questionnaire, then we can't contact them again until their junior year, only with written letters, unless they come on campus for an unofficial visit. And then as seniors, we can call them once a week. Still similar rules as Division II there, but everything's going to take a greater leap and become, I think, much more magnified in the fact that, you know, now that we're Division I, we have to get out and see these kids. We have to have in-homes. We have to, you know, talk with their coaches and pinpoint kids that we think are going to be able to play Division I now for us.
I don't know if it's possible, at least today, when we talk about the move from 2 to 1, but can we expand for just a moment? So you talk about the difference between a Division I kid in terms of grades and academics. Obviously, you want a talented student athlete who happens to be bright, and ideally, you'd like to have them at least a 3-point GPA. But what type of person can you go and recruit now that you could not recruit before, or vice versa?
Well, again, with the Division I, the scale is completely different. With Division II, we pretty much, you know, knew the parameters as far as, you know, he has to have an 18 on his ACT or an 820 on his SAT. And then over a 2.0. Now we've got a sliding scale. Now we can go a little bit lower on the ACT, but it has to go a little bit higher on the GPA. He's got to take X amount of core classes and hours from that. And so, you know, we're really trying to. We started last year. I mean, out of the 6 freshmen that we had coming in this year, 4 of them had above a 3.0, and the other one was at about a 2.9, and then we had the one player who was not qualified actually had about a 2.4, which is almost a C+, and that wasn't good enough. So I think, you know, from our standpoint, we want to recruit kids that can get it done in the classroom. Our 6'10" kid that's a freshman this year had a 4.1. I don't know how that's possible, except, you know, you take more classes and you take harder classes, and you know, you got more credits, and so you can get above all A's. And he had about a 32 on his ACT, and he's in the engineering, and really we sold him on the Purdue University engineering department, and that is so critical for us. I mean, we are a Big Ten university. We do have Purdue and IU, and when you combine them both, we've got, you know, more than one weapon here. We've got, you know, 175 different programs that we can give to these student athletes, and to me, that's the best recruiting tool we could ever have. You know, we'll sell them that first, sell them on our program and on our coaching staff, and sell them on the kids we have here, because that's important. And but as you go, things are a little bit different. In fact, at Division II, we open up with Indiana Tech and Huntington, and both of these schools will have 5 or 6 games in before we're allowed to play. Well, as a Division II, we could go out and watch them play. As a Division I, we cannot live scout them. We have to get it all off tape. We cannot go out and watch them play prior to us playing them, which is a little bit different. So, there's so many different segments that I can't even think of right now, but, we've got to be very careful, going through that we make sure all our rules and everything are we understand, the rules and regulations that Division I has, and if we don't, we need to ask. But we all just took the test here a couple weeks ago, and so we think we're ready for that. But there's so many different things, Division I and Division II, but the great thing for us is we're going to go from that, half of what everybody else had in our league to eventually the 13 full rides, which, Duke and Purdue have that, so it really doesn't mean we're going to go beat them. It just means that we're going to be able to offer some kids some things we couldn't before. And, with the Big Ten degree, with playing in some great venues and arenas around the country, I think kids are going to look at us, even though we can't go to a tournament for a good number of years.
In fact, was it 10 years altogether that you get to wait before we get a chance at the big dance? In our remaining time in this segment, Doug, what do you think is the one biggest advantage to a student athlete now to be playing as a Division I player as opposed to Division II?
Well, you can look at each and every individual and say there'll be some advantages for some, others it may not be. Somebody who wanted to come in here and come to IPFW when we're Division II may not be quite good enough once we go Division I. Our whole recruiting strategy has to change now. We have to go out and bring in student athletes who can compete at the Division I level, and that's going to take a little bit of time. Right now we've got pretty much a team full of Division II kids, and we're supposed to go out next year and play 25 Division I teams. And that's going to be difficult. Plus, going through our Great Lakes Valley Conference, everybody's going to look at us and go, "Oh yeah, they're D1. Let's go beat up on them." And that's some incentive for them, but also it should be for us. For our kids. I think number one, as I said before, and I'll say all along, we're here to sell a Big Ten degree to the student athletes that come in. We're here to sell our campus and just the aesthetics of the campus and how beautiful it looks, and with the new entrance and the signs and the banners and coming to Fort Wayne, which is a great town, a great city. Plus, having the help of in the next couple of years going that route. Our recruiting budget was very minimal last year, and now this year it's even better, and next year it'll be better, and to the point where it's going to increase tenfold, but it has to maintain that level. So I think what's taken away a little bit is part of maybe the down homeness. It does become a little more of a business, and I like to stay with the hands-on and being a coach that kids can talk to and everything, and I still want that. But there are things that we will do Division I that or we can't do Division I that we would do Division II, and vice versa. But I'm really excited for the years ahead. 10 years to wait for a tournament. That will be difficult, but I think we get that extra game, and how far could we really go? For 4, 5, 6 years anyways. We have to grow with this thing, and I'm just hoping that, we can continue to make progress so that, the administration here sees that we're on the right track. We're doing it right, because we pretty much broke it all down this year and started to build it back up, and we will have some growing pains. But, 10 years is a long time. I'm getting close to Social Security then. But, I'm excited. So, I mean, like I said, I do feel bad for the seniors and the coaches in the sports that, you know, really had some great teams this year, and it's very difficult for them. I don't think we'll ever know how difficult it will be for, you know, for Terry and Kelly and you know, the kids that they have there. It's never a good time, but you know, down the road, I think this is the right way to go, and I think the people of Fort Wayne should be excited about it.
Well, it is going to be a challenge, to say the least, and we'll see how things turn out. Again, thanks for coming in today and talking a little bit about what the changes are going to be like, and we will see you later on as we get closer to the tip-off of the new season.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
Doug Knoll has been our guest this segment, head men's basketball coach here at IPFW. We'll take a break and come back with more Mastodon Spotlight in just a moment.
What would you do if you had to choose between the buffalo and the giraffes? Between a flower or an elephant? What would you choose? What if you had to decide between a 100-year-old tree and a million-year-old beach? Between drinking clean water or breathing clean air? Would you make the right choice? Would there be a right choice? Now there's a way to help. Not just one, but all these things. EarthShare, the world's leading environmental groups working together. It's one choice we can all live with. Ask your employer about workplace giving.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. Well, we have another special guest on this week's edition of the show in light of the developments where IPFW is now a Division I school rather than a Division II school with the NCAA. And we want to talk about the area of compliance with athletes having to make sure they're eligible and all kinds of good things. And my special guest this segment is the NCAA Compliance Director for IPFW, or I should say at IPFW, Dave Skelton. Dave, thank you very much for coming here on short notice today.
No problem.
First and foremost, what are the responsibilities of the NCAA Compliance Director?
The two most important areas of primary responsibility relate to working with the coaches and with their prospective student athletes in the recruiting area. And then secondly, once the prospective student athlete enrolls at IPFW, working with them relative to their eligibility. And there's many, many things that go into, particularly when we're making the transition from Division II to Division I, new things to be considered.
Can you expound on any of the new things or some of the new things?
Some of the things that create a difference and are especially difficult to deal with after school has started, but yet here we are. One of them is in Division I, the student athlete must complete his or her 4 years of competition within a 5 calendar year time frame. In Division II, you can complete those same 4 years of competition, but within 10 semesters of full-time enrollment whenever they occur. So the clock doesn't start running and then run for 5 years. It's 10 full-time semesters. So that obviously is something that in some student athletes' enrollment history causes a problem for them when they're now confronted with a calendar as opposed to 10 full-time semesters.
It's interesting, the time frame. Does the Division I prospective student now pretty much have to have an idea of what his or her major is going to be before he or she sets foot on the campus as a freshman?
Well, they should have a good idea, although the major part, declaring a major, actually is the same for Division I and Division II, and that is after 2 years of full-time enrollment, 4 semesters of full-time enrollment in both divisions, you must declare a major. And so that part's not so different.
Let's talk a little bit about the relationship and the work you have to do with the various coaches.
Mm-hmm.
We have 16 sports now here at IPFW involving roughly, I believe, 10 head coaches, because a couple of coaches have dual responsibilities. Just exactly, or as briefly as you can, talk about what it is that you have to deal with. Obviously, we got to keep track of the students and as far as being academically eligible, but how much more particular can we talk?
Well, with those 10 coaches and those 16 sports, that involves pretty close to 200 student athletes. And again, one of the primary areas is working with the coach and the student athlete when that student athlete first begins their collegiate career here, either as a transfer or as a new freshman. And again, we can point up a couple of the things that have created some difficulties for us this fall that are differences between D1 and D2. And that is for the incoming freshmen. The initial eligibility requirements are different, and it's possible that a student athlete, and we have some this year, who qualify as are certified as a qualifier Division II and do not get certified as a qualifier Division I. So who thought they might have been eligible at Division II as a freshman now becomes ineligible as a Division I student, incoming freshman. It's a sliding scale in terms of the SAT, the courses they have to take in high school, things of that sort. The other new student athlete that is confronted with a different situation this year is the transfer from a junior college. For Division II, they only have a total credit hour requirement that they have to meet to come in and be eligible. Well, for Division I, they have to have an associate degree, and then the eligibility starts. So some who didn't have the degree, expected eligibility, now won't because of Division II. So a couple of additional things, and those are a lot of the things that the new students and we've got a lot of new coaches who have been contending with in the last couple of weeks, even prior to that, as they were trying to get the season started.
The fact now that the NCAA has handed down their decision and the appeal has gone in IPFW's favor, and now we are classified as a Division I, and the process has started, depending on the sport, anywhere from 2 to 10 years, a transitional period. For the existing some of the existing student athletes, and it was reported in other forms of the media when the decision came down, it seems like some of them all of a sudden became ineligible. Can you talk about the appeal process that is presently going on with some of those athletes?
Well, and when you say presently going on, it's just barely begun, and we're starting with the student athletes who are affected with sports that are underway. Then we'll have to deal with some others that are coming up in winter and spring sports. But the things that we've already mentioned have become a problem that has to be clarified. And what has to happen is, and let me give another example of another area where it's different for Division I. And when you say we are approved for a Division I, actually we're still a Division II institution who has to abide by Division I rules for this year and next year. I think that's still the case. But anyway, one of the new satisfactory progress rules for Division I is called a 25, 50, 75 rule, percentage progress that you must make, that does not apply to Division I. Does apply to Division II, and we've had a couple or 3 student athletes who have encountered a problem there. We are currently asking the academic units to assist us in reviewing the academic records for 60 of our student athletes who must now meet this new rule. So maybe we'll encounter another problem or 2, not sure.
60 athletes, that's an awful lot of work that you have to do in a short period of time.
Especially in a short period of time, especially, yeah.
Let's go back now towards the athletes themselves. You talk about the fact that you're always in constant contact with coaches. You're in constant contact not only with the prospective athlete once he or she arrives, or maybe possibly before that, and you can explain that in a moment, but once they're here on campus and they've been in the program, how much direct contact do you have with the student athletes?
Well, the direct contact, it kind of depends on individuals, and a lot of the individuals stop by, but we have some contact with a lot of them with a program in our academic services that we have just initiated last year and have enhanced those some this year. And that is, we provide a series at the beginning of every semester, a series of 5 developmental skills sessions where we provide clues and background information for the student athletes in terms of how to take tests, how to study and take notes, what to expect from college professors if they're freshmen. It's different. Things of that sort, so that we're really trying to establish contact with them, and we do that by way of providing these services to them. And then as an individual comes with a question about anything, we try to help them answer it. But primarily our responses relate to the eligibility and helping them academically. If they want to know how they can better perform and become a starter on the baseball team, I have to turn that over to Coach Gurnan.
For the prospective freshman athlete, more so than the transfer student, because he or she is just coming in from high school, first of all, what kind of contact do you have with that athlete's former high school? And then talk briefly about the transition in terms of, obviously in high school there are certain eligibility requirements, but all of a sudden they move up to college and it's a different set of rules.
We don't have a lot of contact with their high school. That's all done through the NCAA clearinghouse to determine their initial eligibility. But we try to establish contact with them as soon as they have their first team meeting here on campus, whether it be a few days before school starts or the first day or two of classes. And we meet with every team, with all their athletes, but specifically to assist the new student athlete in getting oriented, what to expect, what we're going to ask of them to provide for us, information to be read and signed, forms to be signed, things of that sort. And so we try to, just as soon as they're ready to start the year with their first team meeting, then we meet with the teams too.
Take it one step further. Do you anticipate, obviously this is a brand new period of time going the transition from Division II to Division I. Is there, for lack of a better phrase, a specific game plan that you're formulating now that hopefully will be refined as the years go on and to make this process easier?
Well, obviously since school began, when we had already at that point certified our athletes under Division II rules, and then when the other part came into play, why we've had to become familiar with and audit 200 records for some new things. But now that we've identified most of those things that have to be checked in the future, the next time around will be considerably easier.
What's it like working with the people at the NCAA?
You know, I don't have a lot of contact with the people at the NCAA other than we had, when we were members of the Great Lakes Valley Conference, we were assigned a particular contact person there, a young man by the name of John Morris, and he was great to work with. Anytime you were uncertain about the bylaw, you could call. You may have to leave a message, but he'd get back to you within a day, give you the interpretation, cite some places that had examples in the past. So from that standpoint, John was really good to work with. I'm not sure who our new contact will be, but since it's Division I, but they're generally, from our standpoint, when a new question comes up or a new bylaw a rule has been put in, until you get some experience working with it, you have to ask them some specifics about it, and they're pretty good about getting back to you.
Final question, because we're almost out of time in this segment. What would you like to say to the prospective athlete who may be watching this program tonight, or the prospective coach who, be it college or high school, who's working with that prospective student athlete and getting ready to come here to IPFW? What words of wisdom, words of advice can you give?
Well, I guess the first thing I would want to share with them is we have one rule stated outside of our office there, the compliance office in the athletic center, and that rule is do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, the way it's supposed to be done. And if you do that, you'll have no problem. That's easier said than done. I guess my real suggestion to the incoming athletes would be do everything you can as early as you possibly can, because they really run into difficulty because they wait to file with the clearinghouse and then they wonder, am I going to be eligible? Am I not going to be eligible? Then they wait to sign up for classes when classes are closed. So do everything you can as early as you can when it comes to your academics.
Dave, thanks very much for coming in and hopefully explaining to our viewers about the complex process of keeping an athlete eligible and be able to participate in NCAA athletics.
My pleasure.
Dave Skelton has been our guest this segment, Compliance Director with the NCAA here at IPFW. That's about it for this edition of Mastodon Spotlight. Quick program reminder, Friday night, the first live sports telecast of the new school year takes place here on College 56 Sports as Kelly Hartley's women's volleyball team takes on Lewis beginning at 7 o'clock. Be sure to tune in and catch all the action. Ryan Perrott and Mark Franke will bring you all that exciting volleyball action. A pretty good women's volleyball team. Again, Lewis and IPFW women's volleyball, 7 o'clock Friday night here on College 56. And we invite you to tune in next week when we return for another edition of Mastodon Spotlight, where we will highlight IPFW athletics. Until then, this is Mike Moss saying have a great week and go Dons.